you mentioned, you actually hit on part of it. Step one, there's a bunch of different steps because there's all these different benefits and they all are slightly different. But let's start at the beginning. And you said when you love a person or a thing, it almost becomes a part of yourself.
Mm.
And in my view, there's no almost about it.
Mm.
It becomes a part of yourself. And the reason it works that way, I believe, and this is sort of a theory I put forward in the book, is that that's why love evolved to begin with.
Mm.
So was really surprised and fascinated in researching the book to learn how many animal species experience love.
Mm.
Among mammals, it's, love very much in the human sense is fairly widespread. We know this. There's a little gerbil-like animal called a vole that they do a lot of research on. And if you take one of these voles mate for life. So if you take one of these voles and you put it in a fMRI that scans its brain to see what's going on, and you show that vole its little vole mate, its brain will show the exact same pattern of activity as if you have a human in an fMRI and show them a person that they love.
Mm.
So its outward behaviors we already knew look a lot like love. But boy, it sure looks like this vole is experiencing love. And then now we know that the brain activity is essentially the same. So I think it's pretty safe at this point to say, okay, that's love. And these other mammals experience that. Now, in birds, for example, they don't have the same brain structure that humans do. They're not mammals. And therefore, their experience of love is probably further away from ours. And biologists don't use the word love. They call it bonding, mate bonding, or parental bonding, various types of bonding. But if you look at the behavior, it's amazingly like love, even to the point where a male bird, if it's trying to court a mate, a female bird, its attention gets fixed on her. It gets super excited. It loses its appetite because it's so excited. It performs little dances and tries to impress her in all sorts of ways. Brings
It's
her,
like humans.
It's just like it's all the same stuff. It's amazing. You read this list, it's like, my God, that's just like dating 101.
Yeah.
So love is fairly widespread, but it is not true that all species have this kind of bonding. There is a 100% correlation, which is pretty amazing in science, 100% correlation between species that have this kind of bonding and species that either the parents take care of their offspring and or the parents take care of each other. So many species, as you're, I'm sure, aware, the parents don't do anything to take care of the offspring. They lay the eggs, they fertilize the eggs, they're done. And yeah, that sounds attractive sometimes, but that's not the way. Whereas many other animal species, including like bird species or many mammal species, most mammal species, when the offspring are born, they take care of them, they feed them and protect them and whatnot. Evolutionarily, the question then arises, how did this happen? You can say, oh, it's advantageous. If you want your offspring to survive, there's a certain logic to taking care of them, especially if there's some reason you can't have a lot of them. If you can have 5,000 babies at a time, then you might not need to take care of them. You just hope that enough make it through. But if you're going to have a far smaller number of offspring, then it becomes pretty important that you take care of them. So evolutionarily, we can see the advantage of this. But then how did it actually happen? What actually happened in the brain of these animals some however long ago, many millions of years ago, that this started to happen to make this? What I believe happened is that animals already had programming in their brain to take care of themselves. You have to feed yourself, you have to protect yourself, and you have to have some distinction between yourself and the rest of the world so you don't eat your own tail for lunch. So
Hmm.
you know that this is, some way, this is me
Yeah.
and that's not me, right? In evolution, it's always more common to adopt or adapt, I should say, a, a mechanism that already exists to a new purpose than to evolve an entirely new mechanism. It's very unlikely that animals evolve wholly invented new mechanisms. So if animals were to take this already existing mechanism of I take care of myself, I feed myself, I protect myself, etc., and all that has to happen is that definition of their own boundary shifts so that now it includes their offspring. Well, then these behaviors, I feed them, I take care of them, that they do for themselves, now they do for the offspring. And similarly, if it shifts to include their mate, then they feed and take care of their mate to a certain extent. So it's a very simple mechanism. Now I'm cheating a little bit, not really cheating, but I have a certain advantage, which is if this is a mystery story and we're trying to figure out how, how this mystery occurred, how animals came to feed their children, I skipped to the last chapter and read the end of the story. So you skip the last chapter, you look at animals now, in particular humans, because we can ask humans questions. And what you discover is that love in humans is completely correlated with and connected to this exact process of expanding their own sense of identity so that it includes the person or the thing that they love. And that when they do this, they come to behave very generously towards that person or thing.
Naturally.
So even if when people love their car, people say they love their car, they take much better care of their car and they keep their car longer than if people who say they did not love their car. In fact, sometimes people who say they love their car, if they buy something for the car, like a new set of hubcaps or what have you, they'll say to themselves, I'm buying a present for the car. It's a gift for the car. So they really end up framing it in their own mind that way. So we know that today, increasing your sense of identity to include other people or things has this effect of generating care and altruism for them. And therefore, it makes sense to think that this is probably the mechanism that created that in the past. So that would be, an answer to that.
That is a fascinating answer. And I love this conversation. And I want to unpack that. Some of the things you already touched on, I want to just kind of play it back to you to make sure it's right, and then explore it a little bit, and then talk about some of the implications of it, because I think this is fascinating in and of itself, but also to understand human behavior. So, firstly, the idea that love, kind of the definition of love, if you will, at least a component of it, is adopting something or viewing something as part of yourself. I think that's so interesting because pre-show, when you were talking, we talked a little bit about this concept of, at the end of the day, is the most important value always just happiness? We're always just trying to be happy. And you could kind of morph that a little bit and say happiness, again, we said it already, it carries a lot of weight, but we're always trying to do something that's going to make us feel good. Almost by definition, what else would we do but make decisions that we think are going to end up good for us? Now, there could be different time horizons, it could be all different aspects of it. But you can almost get, and I've had this conversation with some people would say, if everybody's being honest, the true value is selfishness. We're all just worried about ourselves and that's really what drives us. And that's a really interesting thing to then tie to what you're saying about love, because it's saying the only way we can actually truly care about another thing, if at our root we're just selfish, trying to kind of find our own happiness and goodness, is if we view that thing as part of us. That kind of addresses that issue where now that is also part of me, so I can view that thing just like me, and the decisions I'm going to make are genuinely going to be in that person or that thing's best interest, because that and me are the same. And it kind of addresses that issue. And it's a fascinating thought evolutionarily, as you're saying it, of that would explain it. That would make sense, that that's the only way we could do that. I have a son who's 8 years old. And I think a lot of people can intuitively feel this, that the pain I feel when my son is upset, the fear I feel if something might go wrong, the joy I feel if he's happy and something goes well, it is because it becomes like, it feels like it's part of me. It's the only one of the few situations where I could say I actually deeply care completely that he is as happy as I am, because exactly the reasons you're articulating. So that's a way I've never considered love before, that kind of connects dots and makes the puzzle pieces fit together in a way that's really, really interesting. And again, ties back to that inherent selfishness that I think many of us have and are kind of programmed with, because we're just trying to survive.